Well, greetings everyone. Welcome to the FAA's webinar series on airspace for UAS operators. My name is Kevin Morris and I'm an aviation safety inspector with the FAA and also a subject matter expert on drone operations. Our webinar today is divided into two segments. The first will be a presentation on understanding Class Echo airspace, and the second will provide an opportunity to have your questions answered live on the air. I'm joined by a team of FAA subject matter experts who are available throughout the webinar to answer your questions. You can submit a question at any time by using the question and answer feature of Adobe Connect. If we're unable to get to your question during the webinar today, don't worry. We will be answering all questions asked and posting them to our website in the coming weeks. So let's begin. Now, we know Class Echo airspace can seem confusing, but good news. By the end of this episode, you will know what the different types are, how they affect your drone operation, how to spot them on an FAA Aeronautical Chart, and you'll know when you'll need an FAA Airspace Authorization to operate within them. Class Echo airspace generally begins where Class Gulf ends, which usually varies between 700 feet and 1,200 feet above ground level, or AGL. Since this Class Echo airspace is not associated with an airport surface area, Part 107 operators do not need an air traffic control authorization prior to flying in this type of Class Echo. The graphic you see on your screen represents a profile or side view of the Class Echo airspace. But let's see how that looks on an FAA Aeronautical Chart. It's important to remember that Class Echo airspace begins at 1,200 feet AGL unless otherwise shown. When Class Echo begins at 700 feet AGL, it's indicated by a magenta shaded ring, usually surrounding an airport. Now, you might be wondering why you need to know about Class Echo airspace that starts at 700 or 1,200 feet when most drone flights are limited to 400 feet. The FAA's Small UAS Rule, Part 107.51b, allows for drone flights to fly higher than 400 feet in certain situations. If you are operating within a 400-foot radius of a structure, you can fly to that structure's uppermost limit plus an additional 400 feet. This could be beneficial for a variety of UAS missions, for instance, inspecting a cell tower. Consider the example structure on your screen now. You could fly to a maximum altitude of 1,865 feet above ground level as long as you remained within a 400-foot radius and complied with all other parts of the Small UAS rule, such as maintaining visual line of sight. In this example, flying at 1,865 feet means that you are operating in Class Echo airspace. And remember, Class Echo airspace does not require an airspace authorization under Part 107. Let's take a look at another type of Class Echo airspace, surface Class Echo. This type of airspace causes the most confusion. Well, get ready, because you're about to become a surface Class Echo expert. Now, the regulations clearly state that operations within the lateral boundaries of the surface area of Class Echo airspace designated for an airport require an airspace authorization. So, what is surface Class Echo airspace, and how do you know when it's designated for an airport? Well, simply put, it's Class Echo airspace that extends down to the surface instead of the common 700 feet or 1,200 feet above ground level. This category of airspace exists to add additional protection to arriving and departing aircraft. Because of this, certain portions of surface Class Echo airspace require authorization prior to flight. We're going to talk about three types of surface Class Echo: Echo 4, Echo 3, and Echo 2. Of these, only Echo 2 requires an airspace authorization. Now, look, If you're a bit confused, you're not alone. But don't panic. I'm going to demystify this and make it something you can easily remember. Through the next few slides, I'll walk you through the different types of surface class echo and how you can identify which type is in your area. We're going to start with class echo extensions. These exist to allow manned aircraft to make safe approaches to runways in bad weather. Just remember that while Echo 4 and Echo 3 don't require ATC authorization, Echo 2 does. Well, because this topic might be challenging at first glance, you may want to watch this episode a couple of times until you become familiar with the information. All of our webinar episodes will be posted to our FAA YouTube channel. So let's talk Echo 4 airspace. Echo 4 airspace is an extension to Class Delta or Surface Class Echo or Echo 2 airspace. I've highlighted green and red areas to help clarify what I'm talking about. This aeronautical chart image shows an Echo 4 extension in the green shaded area. The key to recognizing this as an Echo 4 extension is the magenta dashed line that segregates the green shaded area from the red shaded area. Remember, Echo 4 extensions do not require ATC authorization. Well, here's another example of an Echo 4 airspace extension. Again, the green shaded area represents the Echo 4 area, while the red shaded area in this image signifies Class Delta airspace, meaning the airport has an operating control tower. Like the previous example, the key component is the segregating line, this time a dashed blue line that segregates the Class Delta airspace from the Echo 4 area. As mentioned in the previous slide, operations in Echo 4 airspace do not require an airspace authorization. Well, here's an example of an Echo 3 extension. Echo 3 extensions are associated with Class Charlie airspace. And like Echo 4, Echo 3 extensions are segregated from the adjacent airspace. In this case, because the adjacent airspace is Class Charlie, a solid magenta line is used. Sometimes the extensions are not segregated from the Echo 2 area. In this example, you can see that there are no lines, dashed or solid, segregating the airspace. In this case, the entire area is considered Echo 2 airspace. And Echo 2 airspace requires you obtain an ATC authorization through LANCE or drone zone before you fly. If you're new to the drone community and find the FAA Aeronautical Charts confusing, the UAS facility maps can also be a great resource in helping you understand when you would need an airspace authorization. If the area you would like to operate in requires an airspace authorization, there will be a UAS facility or grid map associated with it. And remember, these are not pre-approved areas. You must receive an airspace authorization prior to operating in any of the classes of airspace listed here. To further illustrate how the two airspace depictions match up, I've placed the aeronautical chart for Lake Tahoe Airport on the left next to the UAS facility map for the same area on the right. This example clearly shows that the Echo 2 area, indicated by red shading, has a corresponding grid map associated with it and requires an airspace authorization. The green shaded area is for the Echo 4 extension. We know it's Echo 4 because it's segregated from the Echo 2 airspace. And as you know, Echo 4 airspace does not require an airspace authorization and therefore does not have a corresponding grid map associated with it. And that's it. So thank you for joining us here on our Echo airspace discussion. For our complete webinar schedule, please visit our website at faa.gov/go/drone webinar. And additional UAS resources are always available on our website at faa.gov/UAS. You can also watch, as mentioned before, all of our previous webinars on our official FAA YouTube channel at youtube.com/user/FAA News. Our next episode will be Airspace Authorizations, what they are and why do they matter, and that will air on Thursday, June 13th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. So please stick around again as we take a short break and then come back to answer some of your questions live on the air. So stand by and we'll be right back. Okay, as promised, I'm back and we're going to start taking some of your questions here live on the air. Just as a reminder, if you would like to have your question read live on the air, simply put the word live, L-I-V-E, in front of your question into the question and answer feature there of Adobe Connect, and it'll get routed to me to be asked, or I should say read live on the air, where I can answer your questions. We do have quite a few questions coming in, so we're going to get started right away, and just bear with me here as I adjust my screen so I can get to the first question. First question coming in says, can we download the recording of this webinar after it has ended? I guess maybe in a roundabout way, yes. As mentioned, all of our webinars will be made available on our official FAA YouTube channel. And I know there's multiple third-party softwares out there that allows you to download videos from YouTube. But whether you want to download it or whether you just want to watch it through the YouTube website or app, all of our videos will be made available on there as soon as we can get them final editing and posting and get them up there. So yes, I do believe you can download the recording probably through some individual software that you can find and download the YouTube video. So thank you for that question. Next one here says, where can I check if the area I'm flying in is Class Echo? Great question. So what we talked a little bit about in the presentation today were a couple of different ways for you to determine what airspace you're flying in. We sort of focused on Echo today, but there are also some other webinars that we've done earlier that talk about identifying airspace. But I'm going to stick to your question here where you're talking about Class Echo airspace. It really depends on your background. For me, I come from a manned aircraft aviation background, so I'm very familiar with sectional charts, which is what we talked about today, the FAA Aeronautical Charts, which are available for free on our website. I can look at that chart, know where I am, and know right away if I'm in Class Echo, Surface Class Echo, and hopefully all of you now can understand if you're in maybe Echo 2 or Echo 3 or Echo 4. Another way for you to take a look is through a UAS facility map. And you can go and look on the web. We have that resource available to you for free. You can look at any of the UAS facility maps here in the United States. We have numerous FAA approved LANCE service suppliers. I don't remember the number we're up to right now, but if you look on our website and you go to the LANCE portion, it will list all the service suppliers. They also pull data directly off of our data server for the UAS facility maps. So those are probably the two easiest ways to get to determine whether or not you're in Class Echo airspace. And finally, we talked about a couple of different types or categories of Class Echo. One that goes down to the surface and one that starts at 700 feet or 1,200 feet or in some parts of the country even higher than that. So make sure you understand which type of Class Echo you're operating in. That will help you understand if you're going to need an airspace authorization or not under Part 107. So great question. Thanks for asking that. Another question coming in is the airspace inside the magenta lines that used to be called control zone. I see you're probably as old as I am, and you remember the days of control zones and TCAs and PCAs. Those are the days, right? I'm assuming you're talking about the dashed magenta lines, and the answer then would be yes. And not to go too far back into the past, but the dashed magenta lines used to be called control zones. They were renamed, I believe, in the mid-90s to go back to just simply saying Surface Class Echo. But if you're a little bit old school like me and you remember the days of control zones, yes, the dashed lines are what we used to call control zones. So thanks for that trip down memory lane. I appreciate it. Good question there. Another question here. They're bouncing around on me a little bit. So a lot of good questions coming in. You guys, the questions you're sending in are they get better and better every episode. So I really do appreciate this. Question: where can we get the UAS facility maps? We can have somebody respond and post, somebody on the production team here, one of our subject matter experts. If you could post the website to the UAS facility maps to the chat so everyone can see that. That website's available. It's maintained. I believe it's updated every 24 hours. If there's any changes, they get posted within 24 hours. But that website is free. You can go to there. Or, like I mentioned, we have a listing of FAA-approved UAS service suppliers, which can also show you some of the UAS facility maps through their apps that they use on mobile devices. So those are probably the two easiest ways for you to see the UAS facility map. And I'm going to find another question here. Aren't authorizations now being handled by third-party organizations that grant access to fly in the various airspaces versus waivers from the FAA? Okay, I'm glad you asked that question because there's a few things in there that I'd like to have an opportunity to clear up. Airspace authorizations can only be given by FAA air traffic control. Now, that might seem a little bit confusing because if you're using a third-party or an approved UAS service supplier, you're opening up their app, you're submitting your information into their app, and then their app is coming back and saying approve or denied for your request. The critical component of that, though, is that after you submit the information, it goes to the FAA servers, and the FAA servers are the ones that actually issue the authorization or the denial, depending on what they might need for that particular day. So the short answer is, even though you're using a UAS service supplier in, for example, Lance, the authorization that you get is still an FAA-issued authorization. And another part of your question here was talking about various waivers from the FAA. I just want to focus on that word waiver a little bit because people interchange waiver and authorization a lot, and they mean two completely different things. To try to explain this, 107.41 requires you to have an airspace authorization to fly in certain airspace. Then we talked about it a little bit today in some other webinars. When you're requesting an authorization to fly in airspace, you're requesting permission per the rule to fly in that airspace. So you're complying with the rule. A waiver is a different type of request. A waiver is saying, for example, our most popular waiver issued right now is daylight waiver, meaning people want to fly at night. The rule clearly states that under Part 107, you have to be flying during daylight hours. And there's some nuance about civil twilight, but I'm going to skip that for the discussion here. You have to be flying in daylight hours. But we do offer waivers for you to fly at night. So the waiver gives you permission to operate in a different level, or a different way according to the rules. So the rule says, look, we're not going to let you fly at night, but when you submit your safety and risk mitigations to us that provide a similar level of safety to the NAS, then we can allow you, per our rules, to fly at night through a waiver. So when it comes to airspace, people that are applying for a waiver now are asking to operate in that controlled airspace, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, or Echo 2, without receiving an ATC authorization. So there's a big difference. The vast majority of you, when you're making your application either in Lance or through Drone Zone, want an airspace authorization, not an airspace waiver. So I'm really glad you asked that question because that can save some folks a lot of time. Don't make the mistake of applying for an airspace waiver when all you need is an authorization. So take a look at your operation. So again, thanks for that question there. A question here, is it a good idea to carry sectional maps when flying near airports? I think it's a great idea to carry a current aeronautical chart anytime you're out operating in the field. Aeronautical charts provide a wealth of information, not only to manned aircraft pilots, but also to unmanned aircraft pilots as well. They're going to show you tower locations. They're going to show you tower heights. They'll tell you whether the towers are illuminated. They'll tell you exactly how many feet AGL that particular tower is. Not only will they show you that, but they'll show you power lines and some other obstructions and wind farms. And I think there's a lot of information that's very valuable to the unmanned aircraft pilot that can be gleaned from a sectional chart. And there's a few different type of charts you can look at depending on where you are. If you're in a rural area, a sectional chart, which is more of a wide, large area chart, is probably a good resource. But if you're in a densely populated area in New York, some of the areas in California, you may want to look at a terminal area chart, which is kind of a zoomed in look on a particular segment of airspace that gives you far greater detail and accuracy than more of a high level view of a sectional chart. But to answer the question, yes, I think it's a great idea to carry a current sectional chart with you when you're out operating in the field. Again, they can be purchased from many different places. You can access them online for free. All that information is available to you. So I do believe that's a good idea. So great question. Thank you for asking. Let me see here. One of the questions is, I want to get an authorization. How do I do that? So how do we get an authorization? Currently, there are two ways under Part 107 to obtain an airspace authorization, either through LANC or through Drone Zone. Now, we just opened up LANC today to more than 100 contract towers. And so our number of airports in LANC are constantly expanding. That's a project that's ongoing. We're always trying to get more airports with control towers into the LANC system. So as those airports come online and they're put into LANC, then you have the opportunity to use a UAS service supplier and get your authorization through LANC. If that airport is not in LANC yet, for whatever reason, you'll need to use the FAA Drone Zone web portal to submit your application. The biggest difference between the two, besides one being usually on a mobile device and one being on a web page, is that the Drone Zone web portal will not give you a near real-time authorization, where most of the time when you use LANC, it will give you a near real-time authorization if you're operating at or below some of the altitude ceilings that are on the facility map. So just keep that in mind. If you have to use Drone Zone, the web portal, give yourself a little bit more time for that application to process before getting your authorization. So again, thanks for that question. Another question just came in is, can I apply for an authorization through the Before You Fly app? The answer is no. Before You Fly app, which is currently, it's still up and running. It's going through some upgrades that are going to be launched later on. But it will not carry the LANC technology for you. So if you're going to need an airspace authorization right now, you're going to need to go through one of our UAS service suppliers that, again, we list a whole bunch of them on our website. They will give you the LANC authorizations, but currently, Before You Fly does not provide LANC authorizations. It does provide a wealth of information like airspace restrictions and TFRs, things of that nature, but it will not provide you with an airspace authorization. So great question. Getting down the list here a little bit. How do you distinguish between Echo 2, Echo 3, and Echo 4 airspace as you look at the airspace map? Well, I hope you just watched our webinar episode, because that would give you a really good idea of how you distinguish between the two. But let me see if I can summarize a little bit for you. Echo 4 and Echo 3 airspaces are extensions on either Class Charlie or Class Delta or an Echo 2 surface area. And like I said in the presentation, the key to knowing that it's an Echo 3 or an Echo 4 extension would be that that area is segregated from the interior area on that map. And I can't jump back into my presentation right now, otherwise I'd show you. But again, we'll post this stuff online for you folks too. But the key is knowing that if the airspace is segregated, you're looking at an Echo 3 or Echo 4 extension. Whether or not you know it's Echo 3 versus Echo 4, I don't think is as important, simply because neither one, Echo 3 or Echo 4 extensions, would require an airspace authorization. It really just has to do with what type of airspace it's segregated from. Class Charlie for Echo 3s, and Class Delta or Echo 2 areas for the Echo 4 extension. But take a look at this presentation again once we get it published on our YouTube channel. That will help out a lot answering that question. So thanks for that. Question here, what do the numbers mean, like 100, 200, 300, 400, or 0 in the UAS facility map? Those are altitude limits. Again, I always have to preface this a little bit when we're talking about the grid maps. The grid map altitudes, don't look at those as pre-approved, meaning that, oh, they say I can fly up to 200 feet in this area, so away I go. No, you still need to submit an airspace authorization request. What that grid map is telling you with that number in there is that when you submit your airspace authorization application through LANC, if you submit it at 200 feet or below, you have a very good chance of receiving a near real-time authorization, green light, go ahead and fly. If it's a 0 grid or a 100 grid, or you're asking to fly 300 feet high in a 200-foot grid, that will not probably come back as a near real-time authorization. That will go to the facility. They'll have to review it depending on traffic flows, traffic management, airport activity that day. They're going to make a decision then based on all of that. And so when you submit for higher in a grid area than what the grid ceiling displays, there is going to be a little bit of a delay on your request. And it's important to remember that just like manned aircraft pilots, unmanned aircraft pilots, if air traffic is busy with other duties or has different responsibilities, or to put it in kind of just basic terms, they're swamped that day, there's a lot of traffic coming in and out, they do not need to respond to you. And I'll tell you from a manned aircraft pilot perspective, there's been times where I've tried to call and get clearance into certain airspace flying a manned aircraft, and I can hear that they're busy on frequency and they don't respond. And that doesn't mean I can go in, it means I have to go back and I have to wait. So depending on how busy they are, they may or may not get back to you in a timely fashion, but those grid map altitudes are the altitudes that they've looked at and said, look, if you submit an authorization to fly at or below that altitude, that 200 feet AGL, then you're probably going to get a near real-time authorization. This question is just coming in here, probably one of the hot topics. The question is, how can I use LANC as a recreational flyer? So let me see if I can handle this one appropriately here. I'll give you the right answer without going too far off the rails. Recreational flyers can access LANC under Part 107. Remember, Part 107 will accept recreational flight operations. So if you want to fly recreationally and you hold a remote pilot certificate issued under Part 107, you can fly recreationally under Part 107 and use LANC as your Part 107 certificate would allow. If you're not Part 107 certificated, and by the way, anybody can become 107 certificated, you simply study, you take a knowledge test, and you go from there. Then if you're not 107, you'd be operating supposedly under the recreational exception, and currently LANC is not available for those recreational flyers operating underneath the recreational, I think they call it the limited exception for recreational flyers. That's something that's coming down the road. We've announced that the FRN, the rulemaking notice that came out, or the final register notice that came out, we are getting towards that. But currently, if you want to use LANC as a recreational flyer, you can do so under Part 107. If you want to operate within controlled airspace as a recreational flyer, not under Part 107, LANC is not available. But we do have a number of fixed sites that have letters of agreement established with the FAA that allow for recreational flights to happen in controlled airspace. Those sites are being plotted and updated daily on our UAS facility map. This is the same map that I talked about in the presentation today. So that information is coming. The information on the recreational fixed sites is available. So currently, while LANC is temporarily not available for recreational flyers, you can still fly in controlled airspace, but you just must do it from a fixed site that has a letter of agreement established with that air traffic control facility. So thank you for that question, and I hope I answered it to at least clear up maybe some of the confusion that you might have. So that's a good one here. Another question here, sort of related, where can I fly if I don't have a 107, meaning I don't have a remote pilot certificate? That answer is recreational flyers can operate anywhere within Class Gulf airspace up to 400 feet AGL. It's only when you get into the controlled airspace where we start to talk about fixed sites and needing LANs, which is currently temporarily unavailable. So there's still, the majority of airspace is still available for recreational flyers. It's only the temporary issue we have with controlled airspace. So where can recreational flyers operate now outside of controlled airspace? Up to 400 feet. No airspace authorization is required. So another great question. Thanks for answering that. And we've gone actually a couple minutes over our time, and it's because the questions that you guys have coming in are just excellent, excellent questions. And I want to try to get you all the information, but unfortunately, I'm out of time today. But remember, even if we didn't get your question either answered on the air or answered through our FAA subject matter experts, we will get to the answer. I promise you guys that. And when we do get the answers and we get them ready, we will publish them to our website so everybody can see the question and everybody can see the answer to help you folks out. So again, I want to thank you guys for joining us for another episode. It's really neat to be able to connect with you folks at this level. I love the questions you guys are sending in. So we look forward to seeing you in a few weeks. I hope to meet some of you at FAA Symposium coming up here the first week of June. But until then, on behalf of the FAA, I'm Kevin Morris. Fly safe.